Taurus, like what's going to make me free in an uncomfortable position. These are things I have definitely thought of, but I almost feel like we need it. I'm like, we have to progress no matter how scary it is. I think a lot about labor. For me, it was like at some point I was like, okay, we have to progress or we're just not going to come to the other side, you know? So I've been thinking a lot about that. And of course, somebody is mowing right now. So welcome.
It's our Zen sound machine.
Yes, treat it as ASMR.
ASMR.
Yeah, welcome everybody to today's Eat and Greet. I'm so happy to be here with you guys. It has been a week of dental distress, so I'm so grateful to have any kind of clarity and sit with you. And we get to talk about a topic that I think is really neat. We're going to talk about the stationing of planets today. I make mention of those things, and I think we've heard of them as we listen to the astrology, but to stop and focus in on what that means, I think is a really, really cool treat. So hopefully in the next hour or so, we'll give you something that is worth the time you took to show up. And Catherine Irvin's going to be our tour guide today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me today, Stormie. It's a true honor to be here.
Oh my gosh, and it's so fun because it was like, you know, as 2020 was happening and I was just have been meeting people left and right, we were like Twitter buddies.
Yeah.
Right. And I was it's like your tweet friend. I don't know. Is there like a word for that yet? I'm sure there is.
I don't know if there's an official one. If there is, I don't know what it is, but
tweeties. How about that? Or tweeties. I don't know. Somebody will figure that out. But it was nice to meet in that arena and see the things that you were interested in, and to hear that you were so interested in the stationing and what that means. I thought was really neat. I have a talk where I'm talking about when Saturn ingresses and then stations and then retrogrades and then backs up. Those are significant moments. So how did you kind of stumble on your awareness of this?
So the idea of planetary stations came into my awareness pretty early on in my astrological education. So I think it was probably just something that my teachers like to talk about and thought was important. I got my education started in New York City. I studied with John Marcusella and Joseph Adeo primarily. And, they talk a lot about planetary stations and how powerful they are. And so I kind of just started to take notice of them when they would happen, like in real time, and eventually started to just kind of build up like a little bit of I've just had a lot of experience observing them personally, and then seeing them work as transits in people's charts, also very, very powerful. So I've just been kind of paying attention to them for about a decade now.
Yeah. Good observable. That's the key, isn't it? Right. You just have to have enough time to watch it happen and like really see the result. That's like the best research.
Yeah, and one of the best ways that I really got to study this effect firsthand is that in addition to practicing astrology, I've had a career as a hairstylist as well. And so when you're working with the public like that, you really get to be kind of like the litmus test as with your astrological observations of seeing these transits at play. Like I have gotten so keen on noticing now that I don't even have to have my ephemeris. I know when the moon has changed signs just from observing just people and the energies in the air, basically.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. It is this fascinating thing that happens when you just get into it. But speaking of getting into it, before we hit our topic, you studied in New York, but how did you get into this? Were you just doing all the hair and you're like, everybody's going crazy when the moon is over here? What happened?
Yeah, so I live in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. And I moved to New York when I was 19, and I had been interested in astrology beforehand. In fact, I bought my first book on astrology when I was only like 12 years old. And I started studying sun signs and elements, and I started kind of observing the compatibility of my friends and of my classmates. And actually, they divided up our class by astrological sign. when I was in seventh grade when we were studying Greek mythology. So that was when I really started to kind of observe that like, oh yeah, that group over there, they are kind of similar. And this group over there, yeah. So what's that about? And when I moved to New York, I started to become aware that there's a whole community of astrologers holding conferences with opportunities for education, and that people weren't only interested in astrology and reading books about astrology, but people were creating their entire lives around astrology. And I just couldn't get enough of it. I started studying, and the obsession continues to this day.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And oh my gosh, and to be, in Cleveland and then have training in New York, these are like big hubs really of information and people studying things in the metaphysical or even in just spiritual fields.
Oh
So
yeah.
how neat for you to kind of be nestled into that.
Oh yeah. We have a big astrology group here in Cleveland too. So
Okay.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So that if anybody's looking for the astrology group, yeah, in Cleveland, have your groups come online.
Yeah, actually they have. So we actually have one of the oldest local astrology groups in the United States. I think there's one maybe in Connecticut, don't quote me, that is a little bit older than ours. We hit our 45-year anniversary just a couple years ago. And so, that's the semi-square
Yeah.
of everything by solar arc. And, just by progression to the sun hit it's 45 degrees. And so we definitely had to go through a big change, and the changes were starting to take place initially, but yeah, we were able to get online and keep up with this craziness going on right now. So
Yeah.
now we have members from all over. So check us out. It's LCAA.
Yeah, awesome. And we'll make sure that's in the description box down below too, because I know that there were, being a part of AFAN and being on the steering committee there, and we had a conversation about local groups and people were trying to find groups. And they couldn't quite find where to be. So anytime we can open the door for people to group up and study astrology, I definitely want to make that available. So we'll make sure that link
Yeah,
is down
totally.
there and available.
Cool.
Beautiful. Well, shall we get into it? The stationing of planets. Uranus is getting ready to station. So big news.
It is. It is. Yeah. Yeah. Uranus is going to station direct on January 14th. That is Thursday. And yeah, we were just chit chatting a little bit about that before the show, before we started to record. And we're excited and a little bit nervous about it.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, and I think just, the nature of Uranus just looking to create freedom where it goes, and sometimes if it doesn't have the electrical pathway to travel, it'll do that through chaos, and then being in Taurus, who is very happy to hold on until the death to whatever it is, to create a demand for freedom for us personally, but also being a transpersonal planet globally. It's exciting and scary because we can see that certain things are trying to hold very, very tight. And then what do when Uranus is forward? He's going to be forward. So we're going to,
Yeah. Yeah. And Uranus is going to station direct in a conjunction with Mars. So to me, that's just like a Molotov cocktail right there. So hopefully people can be on their best behavior, but also we do need change. We do need change to happen. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens on that day.
be on your best evolved behavior.
Please.
Please. Yeah, brilliant. So what are your other thoughts, not just around Uranus, but the station in general? Why? Why is that so significant?
Okay. So first, let's just explain what a planetary station is in case people are a little bit confused about that. So yeah, a planetary station occurs when a planet appears to stand still in the sky. So with any planetary retrograde, it's going to be bookended by two stations. So the planet, from our point of view, is appearing to progress through the zodiac, and then it slows down, it stands still. And that is a point where just visually and experientially, it's very important and something we should care about because it just becomes this very magnetic, commanding presence in the sky. And so we as observers are going to notice that, and we're going to feel the effects of that planet down here on Earth. So yeah, the planetary station, it appears to stand still from our point of view. And all planets station technically, even the sun actually stations by declination at the solstices. So the days cease to get longer or shorter for a few days. But yeah, that's just by declination. But what I'm going to be focusing on today is by longitude, so by zodiacal degree. The planets, all the planets, Mercury outward, all the planets that have retrogrades are capable of stationing. Um, yeah, and yeah, so why do we care about planetary stations? Well, first of all, they're cool. They're kind of rare. If you look through the ephemeris, you're only going to find two pockets of time in an entire calendar year of Pluto stationing or Uranus stationing. And then planets like Venus and Mars, those stations are even more rare because they don't retrograde all that often. So Venus retrogrades every 18 months and Mars retrogrades every 2 years about. And so those stations are very special to pay attention to. The one planet that stations all the time, though, is Mercury. Yeah. So that one isn't as big of a deal to pay attention to because it happens so often. But what is important about the Mercury stations is that that is when the typical symptoms of Mercury retrograde that we typically associate with Mercury retrograde tend to kick up. So it's when Mercury stations retrograde that we start to experience the tongue ties, the email errors, the traffic jams, the forgetfulness, the needing to do everything twice. And then it usually slows up a little bit in the middle of Mercury retrograde. But then once it is ready to station direct again, we get an intensification of those snafus.
Yeah. And it's always interesting because it's like watching Mercury specifically come into shadow. It's like, okay, just take note, look around, because this is what we're going to look at. And then at station, it's really like a little blip of mini chaos. Like, what's going on? And then you're right. Like, we get into it a little, find the flow, and it's okay. And then we're going out, and it's like, okay, couple days, let's just give it a minute, let the energy chill back down, and then you can get on with it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And planetary stations, so depending on which planet, so like with Mercury, I usually use 2 days leading up to the station and 2 days after. So that's why even after Mercury stations direct, like we're not in the clear just yet. Like we still have a couple days to deal with Mercury retrograde symptoms.
Yeah. I always tell people, I'm like, don't be rushing over to any planet who's just come out of retrograde. They have to have their cosmic coffee, get their life together for a minute. It's like if you just woke up and everybody's like, I need things. It's very stressful. It's like, just give it a day or two.
I love that analogy. I love that. Yeah, the planets need their coffee. So yeah, actually on that note, traditionally the planets that are stationary are said to not carry a lot of power because they're moving slow. And planetary speed is definitely an important consideration when weighing a planet's capacity to deliver and function. Um, so that is something that I have just noticed though, is that yes, in like a horary or electional chart, um, stationary planets might not be the most optimal thing that you are looking for or hoping to see. But in the collective, when we're just humans existing on the planet and experiencing planetary stations, they are insanely powerful. They are insanely powerful. And to get back to why do we care about planetary stations? Another big way that they are really important is if you're born on one.
Oh, sure. Gosh, that changes the energetic landscape that you're kind of hidden under right then. So, what does that look like for people?
It can do a couple different things. So it can be incredibly strong presence in the life of the person, and it can be very obvious. Like you can just look at that person and who they are in the life that they are leading, and you could see that stationary planet. But what it can also do, and I see this in most cases, is it does contribute greatly to the theme of that person's life. But it's not usually up front and center. It's usually kind of like part of the backdrop. And sometimes you got to look for it, but it's there. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's really, really strong.
Sure. So, what does that look like? What's an example of that when you kind of see that stationary energy for someone?
So I was going through my files in preparation for meeting with you, Stormie, and I must have looked at 1,000 charts. I was looking at everything, looking at out for these stations because they are rare, like I said. And you wouldn't believe how many actors and actresses have Neptune stations. Like it's just very
Oh,
common. So one of my favorite examples that I found was Meryl Streep.
oh, I love her. I just love her.
Yeah, and she's such a great actress, and I think that's part of the ability of Neptune is to kind of be a chameleon. And Neptune is when you have a strong Neptune, you become porous. Like you can just like empathically and psychically tap into the energy of whatever it is that you're connecting to. You have to be careful sometimes. And so I think for Meryl, like she probably just like a sponge really soaks up that character. And that's probably why one of the reasons why she's so good.
Oh yeah, well, and it's so funny because I think it's called Prom is what she's in on Netflix right now, and it's so funny because she just embodies the role. I mean, she is very shapeable in that, whatever it is that she's picking up. So it's absolutely like I could totally see that, and it seems like a really nice actor actress stamp. Seems like you
Oh,
would
for
want that if you're
sure.
going to be successful.
For sure. I have a nephew born on that. I'm like, get this kid into acting or something.
We're
But
going to the Emmys yet.
yeah. And yeah, and like you said, she's moldable. Like she's like a chameleon. Like she can kind of just plug in and yeah, really, really cool. Another person that has Neptune stationary in their birth chart is J.K. Rowling, and she wrote the whole fantasy series of Harry Potter.
Sure. So it almost sounds like the stationing Neptune or that heavy presence really makes the moving between the worlds easy because with her too, she moved between not only the real world and the fantasy, but real world and the space of her depression, right? She was just
Uh,
really able to access and kind of pour that into everything that she was doing. So that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Sure. And one of the things that I notice come up in the collective, speaking of depression, is that whenever Neptune stations in the sky,
Mm-hmm.
I seem to experience like I've come to call it divine discontent,
Mm-hmm.
where you're kind of just the weight of the world is heavy on your heart and
Mm-hmm.
you're really just in your feels. And one of the places that my mind always seems to go around Neptune stations is like the pain and the suffering in the world and wanting to alleviate it and just having that sense of Neptunian idealism where there's no suffering.
Right.
And
Yeah.
those kind of,
Wow.
yeah, and those kinds of things always seem to come up. So like you said with the depression, it's just like with Neptune, like sometimes you just feel that sense of overwhelm and like emotions just overwhelming you. And so yeah, that's interesting that she has experienced that in her life.
Yeah, and oh my gosh, I can, for me and as a teacher around Neptune is like once he stations and then goes retrograde, like reality is very concrete because Neptune's like backed off. So my gosh, at the stationing, that pivot between our world and what could be, or the ideal and the real, these are PowerPoint moments as that's happening, I think.
Yeah, and that can be very harsh to kind of see that contrast as you're mentioning with Neptune. That kind of plays into, yeah, it's intense. And then interestingly, Emma Watson, who acts
Oh,
in the Harry Potter series, she also has a Neptune station.
okay.
Yeah. And I know she's recently started to champion um, certain political issues and things like that. So it'll be nice to kind of see her step more fully into her Neptune station that she was born on.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what she does with it for sure.
Uh-huh. But yeah, one other thing that I see commonly, one of the common threads that I saw with Neptune stations is name changes.
Oh, oh, sure. Okay, I guess that makes sense right in there, right? So what's the name change? Is this when Prince became a symbol? Is this
Ooh, we might have to look that up. I'm sure he was having Neptune do something.
something, right? Yeah, some interaction where it was like, let's become a symbol.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe his Neptune station by progression or something. We'll have to circle back. But yeah, I've just seen people just adopt pseudonyms. Even J.K. Rowling, she has like an alternate pen name that she uses. So yeah, you just can see that with Neptune also, just being able to, again, like get into character.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So what happens when we see like Saturn or even the Uranus station that's coming up? Have you seen anything?
Yeah. So with Saturn, it's distinctively different. So the other thing with Neptune I'd like to mention is that often it gets like real foggy and rainy even, at least where I live here in Cleveland,
Oh,
which
wow.
isn't too uncommon for us, but it just happens to line up a lot. The last time Neptune station, I got a picture of the crescent moon and it was foggy. So that was interesting. But yeah, Saturn is totally different. I call Saturn the buzzkill. It just especially when it's stations, it just brings everything down.
Yeah.
That thing that you're hyped about, that thing that you're happy about, it just brings it down to base level. And so I've seen Saturn function as like, man, I got the blues today. I'm feeling really bummed out today. But
Hmm.
also I've seen Saturn stations just make everything just blah, like it is what it is. Like it's nothing exciting. It just is what it is today. It's just a basic day today.
Yeah, I will tell you, like, I think just in my chart, maybe I'm just particularly sensitive to Saturn movements and interactions. And so I can feel the station and I'm like, okay. And it's like even my vision is different. It's like more steady. Everything just kind of steadies out. It's really an interesting feeling because again, it's that the station is like that pivot point between what was and what's coming, you know? So I definitely am very sensitive to the Saturn movements in general.
Yeah, and I love what you just said because I've noticed too, it just brings everything down and it really clarifies. Like it really just puts your feet on the ground and it's not fun to sit with yourself on a Saturn station. Like I always feel I have to stop myself from trying to elevate my mood or whatever. I mean, it's natural to want to do that, I suppose. But I've found that if I can just sit with Saturn on the Saturn stations, I'm going to see things that I needed to see.
Right. Right. And it just is what it is. I love that you said that because Saturn's like, I'm not saying no to anything. I just want you to see what it is.
Right. And then you can decide no.
Right. And then you should probably in your best interest.
Yeah. Like, let's be practical and sensible for a minute here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's
Mm-hmm.
devise the plan. But yeah, so people born on a Saturn station, And these stations, I'll also say that being born on a planetary station, it seems to function a little bit like having, say, for example, that planet on an angle or
Okay.
like conjunct a personal planet. So if you're born on a Saturn station, it does bring that sense of, it could be austerity, it could be just very practical, it could be very methodical and just adhering to the rules kind of thing.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, One person who I found was Frida Kahlo. So for her, it was probably related to her leg accident, the thing that kept her, because Saturn inhibits. And so that was something that she really had to work hard to overcome.
Sure. Sure. Very Saturnian. My goodness.
Very.
Yeah, and
Yes.
even I don't know about you, but like even I feel like when you look at her work, it's very colorful, but it is heavy colorful. Like it's a very Saturnian and it's not always easy to breathe in.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, and she doesn't smile much, does she?
No, and her eyebrows are so serious that you're like, that has to be Saturn.
Yeah, it's very Saturn. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, and one of my favorite tidbits about Frida Kahlo is that she and her longtime partner, Diego Rivera, like they didn't live in the same house. They had that Saturnian boundary. She's like, I need my space. And they just knew that they functioned better together in that way. And so there you kind of see them making their own rules. And that's something you sometimes see with prominent Saturn as well is, you know, you go by the rules so much in your life and then eventually you have to make your own.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's neat because when we're talking about planetary station and you think about who do they rule, right? That's exactly what we see. For so long, you can Capricorn it out, and eventually you're going to Aquarian something because you're going to be like, I can't do it this way anymore. So it's interesting to kind of bring the even the characteristics of the signs into the energy of what's happening.
Ooh, I love that take, Stormy. I love that so much. Yeah. Yeah. And now that you mentioned signs, you definitely want to pay attention to the sign that the planet is stationing in because that can definitely influence the experience for someone born on the planetary station. Is that
Mhm.
how comfortable is that planet in that sign? And then also collectively, like I noticed that when Saturn was in Sag and its station, it was a rougher come down because it was in a fire sign.
Sure.
And then
And an
since
optimistic one at that.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just like a harsher like come down there. But since Saturn has been stationing in its own sign, it's really just been kind of that it is what it is, Eeyore kind of Saturn. So yeah, and then another person who has been on TV or in Netflix series rather is Jillian Anderson.
Yes.
And she was just playing Margaret Thatcher, and Margaret Thatcher is so Saturnian, and she just did such a good job. And now we know why.
Right. Oh my gosh. I mean, even looking at her as that actress, I was like, that makeup, the way they aged her, I was like, that is phenomenal. Because if you look at that woman without makeup, nothing close to that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and she kind of has like the eyes, like even when she was playing Agent Scully in the X-Files, like she just kind of had that very dismal and she was the counterpart to Agent Mulder who was like aliens exist and she was the skeptic.
Hmm.
Prove
Hmm.
it to me.
Yeah. Oh,
So
she's great.
Saturnian.
She's so great. Oh my. Plus, I just think that I'm really a fan of people with red hair. I swear I was like a little Scottish girl in some lifetime. I'm like, oh, you have red hair. We must be kin.
Have you ever tried it?
Oh, yeah, I totally. Well, I mean, like, I got a cute little red wig and it lasted about 2 weeks. And I was like, well, this is terrible. I just need other people to have natural red hair and then that will be great.
Yeah, yeah. It's fun to try on new things. But yeah, Taurus, yeah, you're a Taurus. So like consistency is good. So don't want to overcommit on the hair color change.
Yes, I'll restyle, but I certainly am not going to color.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and then another theme that I've seen with Saturn was are you familiar with Kundalini yoga at
Mhm,
all?
mhm.
So Yogi Bhajan, he was born on a Saturn station.
Okay.
And this
Oh,
is interesting because if you've been paying attention, so I used to practice a lot of Kundalini, and the practice is very Saturnian. If you get into it, it's very like you do X for X amount of time and it produces this result. And that's so Saturn. What you put in is what you get out.
mhm,
And Kundalini yoga is it was always promoting like 30-day meditations and you do this practice every day. And it's just so Saturnian. But yeah, he was recently in the news and for all these accounts of abuse coming out. And so that's also another Saturn theme that I've seen with other people born on Saturn stations is the theme of consequences.
mhm. Oh, sure. Consequence, reward. It's just like whatever Saturn's got to offer. If you're in the vibe, you're kind of going to get those sprinklings, right?
Totally.
Yeah, but it's
Totally.
super an energy of accountability as well. And I think, just globally in this last few years, we've just seen so much of that Saturnian accountability. And at every station, there's been something in terms of accountability.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we can look forward to with these stations is that they do bring about interesting reversals, as you've mentioned, and shifts, and it really accentuates that point in the sky. And we've been talking a little bit here about Uranus stationing, and it's going to be stationing not just with Mars, but it's going to be activating the square with Jupiter and Saturn. And it's going to be bringing about some big changes that we're going to be working with all year. So it is exciting that, yeah, that this is going to be happening. And that's another thing to watch for with these planetary stations is that if you have a planet stationing in aspect to one of your natal planets, that is an intensification of that transit. So if you're going to have Uranus, let's just keep using that example, stationing, it's going to station at 6 degrees and 43 minutes of Taurus. So if you have a planet right around that neck of the woods of the fixed signs, you're already having the Uranus transit. That planet is already waking up and shaking up whatever point or area of your chart that it is transiting. But this is an intensification because Uranus might typically, like if it's moving at its fastest, it might take like I don't know, a month maybe to pass over a specific point in your chart, give or take that orb on either side. It might take a
Mhm.
month, but when you have a station like this, I mean, Uranus is sitting within a degree of its station point for 3 months.
Yeah. Wow. It's interesting because I almost feel like, if it's stationing and looking at something in your chart, a stationed planet is looking right at your planet and saying, make no mistake, I see you. This is what I'm discussing with you, and before the volume maybe gets turned up and it gets going along, but it's almost like a can be a reverent, I guess, even moment to say, I'm very clear on what we're talking about here.
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah,
Mhm.
you're going to get the message. Like Pluto, you might get 5 hits to whatever planet it's transiting. You can get up to 5. Um, but like with Saturn, you typically get 3.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people just get the full experience.
Yeah. And so, like, the first time Saturn passes over your Venus, you're going to get, the awareness of the problem
Mhm.
comes to the fore. And then the second time it retrogrades back, you're like, okay, I still need to work on that. And then the third time is like the final cleanup. But if you get Saturn moving direct and it stations on your natal Venus and it's hanging out there for a while, it's going to be a lot at once. It's going to be those first two wrapped into one, and then you'll get the cleanup after. But yeah, it's definitely intense.
Yeah, it's like the accelerated learning program.
100%. Yeah, exactly. Summer school.
Yeah, the 6 week instead of the 18 program.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so what happens when you have like our faster moving planets station like Mars and well, we did Mercury, but Mars and Venus, what happens when they station or are stationed in a chart?
Okay, so yeah, the Venus one is pretty hard to observe, to be honest with you. I couldn't find a lot of charts with it. I
Mhm.
found several charts of people that I know personally that have it. And yeah, there's usually some kind of it just what I've come to understand it to do is again, it just makes that archetype of that planet really prominent in that person's life. There could be something I've seen with it is like a significant and defining love story in your life, but it's not necessarily your typical one, or it's not necessarily um like the most healthy. Do you know what I mean? Like there's something with the Venus being retrograde or stationing retrograde that makes that planet not only more important for the person, but it makes it function a little bit differently. So that relationship that that person just can't seem to get away from, that everyone is like, why don't you just get away from that person and move on and find
Right.
something healthier? We can't understand the value and the process for that person because it's very unique being born on that Venus station. So relationships are going to be a little bit different for that person, but again, very, very important in that person's life.
Mhm.
Venus being born on a Venus station or with Venus retrograde for that matter, um, sometimes it does delay the finding that meaningful love connection. It can just put it off till later. Either it's just something that you have to be a little bit more patient for, or you just aren't making the time for it. And usually the two kind of are coupled often. Like you might be someone who prioritizes your career and just love is just not the most important thing for you.
Yeah.
I notice a lot with people born with Venus retrograde that they have a very strong sense of personal value, and it's not always going to line up with how everyone else lines theirs up.
Yeah, I have found the exact same thing, almost as if it is like an impossible standard because it's such an introspective Venus retrograde in a chart. I think is so highly introspective that you do know yourself, and that is sometimes really a high expectation for the rest of the planet.
Oh, totally. And another thing I've seen with Venus retrograde is just being almost more confident about what you don't like or what you're against or what you don't want.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that goes right in line with your standards scenario. Yeah. But yeah, one famous person we can look at who was born on a Venus station was Michelangelo. And Michelangelo was a Renaissance artist who is famous for painting the Sistine Chapel. But he wasn't just a painter, he was a sculptor too, and did the David sculpture.
Mm-hmm.
So, how Venusian is that to be? I mean, he's literally a Renaissance man, like doing all of the arts, and he was an architect too. And so, you have that eye for form and balance and beauty really coming out strongly in this example.
Yeah, wow. And the idea that with that Venus, it wasn't just a straightforward Venus, when he talks about painting the ceiling, you even think about that visually, he had to get into a specific position to do that. He was going to have to invert in order to get that done. And then even with David, it was never about creating that. It was chipping away until he found it, right? Very inverted kind of ideas of what the art is.
Oh
It was
my God. I
crazy.
love that. I love that take, Stormy. That's amazing. I love that so much. Yeah. Another person that has Venus station is Amy Winehouse.
Mm,
So,
yeah.
that voice, huh? Like,
That voice, her connection to her person, huge,
mm-hmm.
huge. Almost
Yeah.
like Venus can't move.
Right. Yeah, and then she was also self-destructive. So I mean, you could see that probably coming out in other areas for her chart, but that is kind of like taking that element of Venus of pleasure and saying like, no, I don't want to be like I mean, with her the way that she had her addictions and habits and things like that, it was almost like she was taking Venus to two extremes. Like
Mhm.
you're chain smoking and that was probably doing the Venus, like the addiction, like what I want, um but also it was self-destructive. And so yeah, and when I use these examples, it doesn't mean that if you were born on a Venus station that you're going to be very self-destructive and or a Renaissance artist, but these are just examples of how these energies of these planets can show up as prominent in your life.
Well, and it's neat too because in the space, like we become the observers and the astrological researchers to watch, just like the ancients did. We only know what we know now because they watched over and over and over again to see what the patterns were. So we come and we talk about these things and what I've been watching and what I've been observing, and that's how I think astrology continues to grow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're in speaking of Renaissance, we're in an astrological Renaissance because we get to never before have I been able to connect with so many brilliant minds on astrology. So it's super cool.
Yeah, thank goodness for technology.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what about this Mars station?
Okay, so oh, and one thing I wanted to add about Venus for collective Venus stations. Venus stations I want to buy everything. And I know we advise our clients like don't make impulse purchases on Venus stations because everything just seems more beautiful to you. You're going to buy stuff you don't need. You're going to spend too much money. So we always instruct or advise people to hold off. But it is around those stations, Stormy, that I am on Etsy. I'm like, I want jewelry. I want nice things. And I'm also just thinking of stuff that I need for my house. And so I always find myself taking those astrological risks. Like I'm going to buy this, and if it breaks or if I don't wear it, then I guess I'll remember that for next time. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's always something I want to do.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, 2020, I did it on the station. I bought a new computer screen and I was in the store saying, Stormy Grace, you're an astrologer. You literally told your people not to do this and you're about to make this big old purchase. And I did it and I still have it and it doesn't work.
What?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so don't give in to Venus. Don't give in to Venus on her stations. Well, maybe
Don't do
station,
it.
yeah, maybe station direct, but yeah, hold off. Keep
Mhm.
them, keep them in the shopping cart. But yeah, so Mars, when Mars stations, oh my God, we just had a Mars station. And when Mars stationed retrograde, I was taking walks outside and I could see everyone just running so fast. You see people out for jogs, but like
Getting after it.
yeah, they were getting after it. And yeah, so that's something that I would actually advise as almost like a remediation of how to work with the Martian intensification for any intense Mars transit is to sweat. So when Mars stations, that's a really good idea. Like get moving. The one thing I see that I don't really enjoy on Mars stations is the road rage.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And people just less patient on Mars stations. Um, People are more likely to just be confrontational, say what it is, say what's on the mind, like with less of a filter. And so that's something that I often see. And you just, I'll never forget it. Like one time I was in New York and Mars Station, and I saw someone get punched in the face.
Oh my
Like,
God.
and that's an extreme one, y'all. Like, it's not, you're not always going to get to see that. But
Sure.
yeah. So Mars stationing, that is a lot more intense. Anger definitely comes out, especially if we're moving direct from a Mars station and we've kind of been keeping it under wraps. So yeah, it's definitely time to hit the accelerator is what happens when Mars stations direct. When Mars stations retrograde, the energy levels, it can do both actually. I've seen it do both where you suddenly have no energy.
Mhm.
It's like the switch is shut off. But I've also seen just because Mars is stationing and it's strong, I've seen people, be a little bit more forthcoming. I've also felt this last one in Aries. I felt like I had all this energy right around the time that Mars station retrograde. So I've definitely seen it do both.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, and I was like a big fan of the station direct. I was like, I literally could just like feel that. I was like, whew, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like a
Yeah, me
long
too.
season. It was a long season.
That was a good one though. I felt like I got a lot out of that Mars
Oh
retrograde.
yeah. Oh yeah, I did too. I hope you guys out there did too. I mean, there is a lot I got done. There was a lot of re-looking at the strategy of the way that I was doing things. And Chiron was also retrograde at that time too. So a lot of it I got to get down to the ego, right? And go, well, why am I doing this way? Because I obviously care about what someone else thinks of me. Why don't I do it in this strategy, which is who I am? You know, a good Chiron in Aries is good for all of us for the old identity challenge.
Oh, yeah. And I love that with Mars being retrograde strategy because, yeah, I mean, not only were we trapped inside, but I just felt like I couldn't, like I had it in my 10th house and I just couldn't come up with creative ideas like I normally do. But once it stationed direct, it was like, all right, we're doing this. Here we go. Here we go. Juice is flowing. So, yeah, that was interesting for sure.
That's awesome. So what about people with Mars station in the birth chart?
So,
Do they
yeah.
just have that holding pattern?
So, again, this is a more rare one to find. One of my favorite examples, though, is Bernie Sanders.
Oh,
He has a Mars station in his chart, and I believe it's in Aries also. So yeah, I mean, he's an older guy and he is like extremely he's extremely with it, you know? Younger people love him and Mars, when we're talking about archetypes, Mars is like that more youthful fighter. I've seen Mars show up with social justice all the time. And so he's really not this Saturnian character, is he? Although he was actually born on a triple station, though. So Bernie, he does have Saturn. He was born on a Saturn station, Mars, and Uranus station. But I think that since Saturn is competing with Mars and Mars is in its own sign of Aries, we're seeing that Mars a lot stronger.
mm-hmm.
And
Plus, it's like, you know, that parent-child relationship, but Mars has the upper hand in that one.
yeah, and that's why he's never stopped fighting.
Mm-hmm.
He's not the type of politician who's gotten comfortable, you know? being a career politician, he's calling all of that out. And that's something else that Mars in Aries does, is it calls out.
Oh yeah. We had a
Like,
whole season of call out just here.
oh yeah. Yeah. So I think that that comes up really strongly for him. And yeah, he's very dynamic. He's very animated too. Like you can hear that he's upset even when he's just talking to you. Like you can hear that there is that very fiery Mars there. And that's probably what keeps him going, to be quite honest. Um,
Hmm.
Another person who I love is RuPaul.
Oh yeah.
So RuPaul has Mars stationed retrograde in Cancer. So that is not Mars's favorite place to be. And so RuPaul has just kind of had to find their own way. Like he has like I mean he's definitely like a trailblazer, especially for the gender fluid community. And RuPaul has a show on TV and they've just been around for a really long time. So that is one of my favorite examples there.
Yeah, that's also interesting too with the Mars retrograde in Cancer, almost like championing the way for that fluidity or championing the way for that feminine energy, whatever that would look like. And that just happens to be that expression.
Absolutely. And the Mars is strong for RuPaul because he's very like, and I'm pretty sure I'm getting his pronouns right. I'm pretty sure he is a he. I'm pretty sure. I apologize if I am wrong. But yeah, RuPaul has that drag queen sass. You know, it's it's Mars.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh honey, you know what I mean? So yeah, he definitely has that strong Mars, but it is in that Cancer, and Cancer is more maternal. And so RuPaul has kind of led the way for bringing drag queens onto TV. And so I would think of RuPaul as kind of like a mama in that regard. So
Absolutely.
Mars and
If
Cancer.
you watch him move, you can tell how at home in his own body he is. Right? It's interesting. I was watching this interview he was doing, and he was walking into the room and then he sat on the couch. But it was almost as if he was already so at home in his own body that the couch was the addition.
Super confident, super
Yeah.
comfortable. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And Mars is all about like what I want, right? And so, yeah, he's found his unique way, and that's Mars is, the trailblazer, finding our way to get what we want. And so, with retrograde planets and stationary retrograde planets, it still falls into that modality of I need to find my own way. The way I do things, the way I achieve, the way I go about the things that I want are going to look different than what most other people want.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And it's so funny. The comment section is saying one, yes, his pronoun is he, and that he just owns a room. It's
Oh, yeah.
amazing. That's amazing.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. So here's a question for you that I think is good. It came from the chat, and I know the answer, but you're the guest. How do we find the station? How do you
Oh,
know?
great question. So, the best way to find out when a planet is stationing right now or in your birth chart is to look at an ephemeris, because an ephemeris is going to have like the shaded areas in it. And so you're going to be able to spot out like very easily when Uranus stations, because the color is going to change. And so if your birthday is within a few days of that station, then you were born on a planetary station. And I tend to use a larger orb with Pluto or Neptune, or I'll use like 5 days on either side. That's when I can usually feel the shift of the planet is for 10 days, five on either side. And then once you get down to Jupiter, it's really like 3. Like I'll feel 3 days with Jupiter, 3 days with Mars, and 2 days on either side with Mercury. And so if you were born within those windows of a planetary station, then that's how you know, because your software isn't always going to tell you. Your software is going to, most software, unless you toggle it in the settings, is going to just tell you if it's retrograde or direct. So some software will put a little S by the planet if it's
Mhm.
stationary. So what I've done in Solar Fire, because that's what I use, is I have adjusted like the orbs. So if a planet is stationary, I think mine I put to 4 days on either side.
Okay. Right. Yeah. So if you've got solar fire, and also if you have solar fire, they do have a training coming up January 31st. If you don't really know how to use your solar fire, just FYI. But also, like, it's cool how you can play with it in there, but it's also good to just learn to see it on the ephemeris in case you don't have that.
Yeah, totally. And if your ephemeris doesn't have that shading distinction, because some of them, the retrograde planets are gonna be shaded in gray, and but the online ephemeris, it doesn't have that. So if you're using an online ephemeris, you'll just want to look. You'll have to look extra hard though, because you'll want to see when it changes from an R to a D.
Yeah.
So,
So right in that space in between. And once you spot it, you spot it, you got it.
mhm.
So that can be the adventure this week to go see when it's happening. And because Uranus is going to be stationing here just in a day, I don't even know what day it is, in a day, you can look that up. Let that be your first kind of lesson with this one.
Right, right. So, yeah, and then if you weren't born on a planetary station, don't feel left out because then you want to look if you're into progressions. And I know you're into progressions, Stormy, but yeah, there you can most people have a planet, whether that's Mercury or maybe another one, stationed by progression, and that can be really cool too.
Yeah, there's always an opportunity. I mean, look, you're going to be busy in your life. That is what I've come down to, right? You're going to be busy in your life. Don't worry if it's station, not station, retrograde, not retrograde, because at some point, whether it be by progression, solar arc, something like that, you're going to experience the energies in the flip flop position. It seems like
Yeah.
there's a lot of availability to just experience the fullness of your chart while you're here.
Yeah. So, should we hit briefly on the planets that we missed?
Oh yeah, let's do. We were so excited about like the select ones.
Okay, so Pluto. Pluto is harder to find in my celebrity files as well, because I think if you're born on a Pluto station, it does make Pluto very strong in your life, and Pluto tends to be private.
hmm Yeah,
So,
below the wave of consciousness. So sometimes very quiet, sometimes so quiet we don't know.
right, right. Yeah, and Pluto is just, it's when you have a strong Pluto, the inner world becomes richer.
hmm
There's
Mm,
just a lot more going on beneath the surface for a person with a strong Pluto.
yeah, and they know it.
Yeah. And so that tendency to be seeking for what's in the undercurrent or what is driving that energy. I my head about exploded when I found out that David Icke was born on a Pluto station.
Really?
Yeah, and if you don't know David Icke, he is like one of the OG conspiracy theorists.
hmm
Yeah.
Once you see it, it all makes sense.
Yeah. I read my first David Icke book when I was like 14. My grandparents had a copy at their house and oh my God, I was into it. I was into it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I feel like you can't even like touch on conspiracy theory without it leading back to the Ikeness.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So I just think that's so Pluto, like reading too deeply into something, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and so when it's happening for us in the collective and Pluto stations, like the sense of paranoia. I have really seen that in people, that it's just kind of like an unsure, like trust no one, not quite Hunger Games, but just like we're almost there
It can
energy.
it can definitely feel like that. And then the other thing I experience with Pluto stations is it just feels like you're in like an 80s like goth video, like music video. Like it's super moody and I just want to be alone and overthink things and be in my feels. And that is just all Pluto for me.
So it's like puberty for every age.
Yes, you get to relive puberty when Pluto stations biannually.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so, I mean, okay, so where are we at? Let's see. So we've got Uranus who's going to station. And then the next one, so we'll be moving to Mercury stationing right before retrograde.
Yeah, so an example of Uranus and a Uranus station person is Lady Gaga. She definitely
Mm,
does her own thing, like wild card energy for sure.
yeah.
So you'll see that theme a lot with people born on Uranus stations is they are meant to do something completely different. Like they are just the wild card
Wow.
and um, very much going their own way for sure. Um, yeah, we didn't touch on Jupiter either. So yeah, Jupiter, that is just like a very big presence often. There might be themes of spirituality coming in. Whitney Houston was born on a Jupiter station, and I know that her music career got started with her church, and that was
Yeah.
always an important piece in her life.
Wow.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And her music has that Jupiterian vibe, like it's
Very big.
uplifting. Yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. But yeah, you also see Tom Cruise was born on a Jupiter station. He's big into the Scientology. And then I know we're all sick of hearing this person talking about this person. Well, at least I am. I guess, speak for myself here. But Donald Trump, he was born on a Jupiter station.
Sure. Makes sense though. I mean, and really, when you just stop and look at the chart, Trump's chart, it's pretty magnificent when you look at all of the nuance astrologically that's available in it.
It really is. And I hate to admit that, but yeah, his chart is it's exceptional. And that's how he's lived the life that he has and gotten away with so much, in my opinion. I got to specify that.
Sure, sure. But it is certainly when I don't know, I think that that's the thing about astrology that I love is like that when we really pick the charts apart and get into the nuance of these different placements, it there is something to see.
Totally. Yeah, that's why I think we all keep coming back, right? Like once an astrologer, always an astrologer. Like you're never done looking and discovering and uncovering new layers. I mean, even like I've been looking at my own chart for 2 decades now and like I'm still learning new things or people in my family or even clients when they come back to me I might be using different techniques or coming to approach the
Mhm.
symbols from a different place in my life and so for some people it's like I'm reading their chart all over again.
Right. Oh gosh, yeah, I've definitely had that. And it's very Maya Angelou, when you know better, you do better, or when you know different, you do different. Right. And that is definitely been my experience. I had that just a couple weeks ago with somebody where I just had a new set of techniques and we had an entirely new experience and we've been working together for years. It was really cool.
Isn't that amazing?
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
love that.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Okay, so our last example is Mercury, and you're going to find a lot of Mercury station individuals, like a lot of them. They're everywhere.
Hmm.
So because Mercury is going to station minimum 6 times a year.
So you have some chances.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I've just come to observe about people born on Mercury station is that Mercury just gets used in a very big way in that person's life, whether they're using it for their career, or this is a person that just talks a lot or uses their voice for something important. Like Drew Barrymore, she's an actress, but now she has a talk show.
Hmm.
She was born on a stationary Mercury. Um, Mandy Moore, she's a vocalist and an actress, and she has Mercury station. Um, there's just too many. Like I stop writing them down because there's just so many that you can find. A lot of musicians whose charts I looked at, a lot of actresses and actors. You can easily find Mercury station.
Yeah, now I'm gonna have to like go back and look and see if I'm a Mercury station. I have such prominent Mercury energy. I'm like, okay, now I gotta go find out.
Yeah, get back to us.
Yeah. I know I don't think anybody would be surprised. They'd be like, yeah, talking. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, you've made a whole career out of talking, and I was watching your YouTube channel from like early on in my astrology interest. Like, I think I stumbled upon your channel in like 2009, I want to say.
Oh God. That's crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, it started with like videos, and then now you're interviewing people, and so yeah, that's very mercurial.
Yeah, it's been a road. It's been a road.
Yeah, and you're teaching too.
Hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. Which is just like, I don't know, the best. It's just the use of all of that Mercury. You kind of have to come out here and put your chart to the best use,
Yeah, I love
regardless of
it.
what's happening in it.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of clients, they ask me, what's my purpose? And yeah, there are certain things in your chart that talk about things that might feel more in alignment with what feels like your purpose, like what you're here to grow into. But I tell people all the time, like your whole chart is your purpose. This is your blueprint. This is what you incarnated with for this lifetime. This is your purpose. And there are so many ways that you can express the energies in your chart, and they can change throughout your life. And but like that's what you're supposed to be doing, is what's right here.
Yeah, but it's also neat to have talks like this where we say we know that this is a significant thing that happens in the sky, but what makes it significant, and kind of dive with it a little bit and see what it means. And I just think it's great that we picked this timing too, right before Uranus is going to come out, so we can kind of sense and be with the energies right now and see.
Yeah, and so one of the other things I'll just add, because we kind of keep picking at Uranus here, like a charcuterie board. Um, but yeah, Uranus stations, I find that they give me like the jitters. Like I'm buzzing high right now, not gonna lie, and feels like you don't need that extra cup of coffee when you're on a stations. And I think one way that probably a lot of people are going to be experiencing this Uranus station is restlessness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I think we've all found a way to manage and find the flow that works best for us during this pandemic. But I know personally, I'm like, I missed my life. I want to get back out there. And I'm still gonna keep it chill at home, because that's what works for me and my family right now. But I'm like, I want to go out again.
Sure.
And so I
Sure.
think that restlessness is really going to kick up here, um, around the Uranus station, and certain people are going to be, let's say, breaking free and expressing their desire for freedom and change in very big ways this
Mhm.
week.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely see that globally. And I actually was kind of thinking a little bit into it too, like how many acts of just genuinely big but surprising kindness we'll see, right? Because there is also, it's probably not the right way to say it, but I feel like a restlessness for love as well, or some kind of contact that feels social and feels good instead of so uncertain. So I'm kind of interested to see how that plays out. And I will tell you, thinking about the stationing, and my sixth house of health is ruled by Aquarius.
Ah,
And I've had all of the stuff going on. I even had the conversation with my dentist. I said, I just feel like the next few days will be rough. They will be very electric.
oh yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
even in recovery.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Uranus does bring things out of nowhere. So did that like come out of nowhere for you?
Well, yes and no. I was
Yes and no.
watching Saturn. I was like, Saturn, it's always some BS with you. I'm always given what I need to take care of it. But I knew upon ingress into the sixth house, I just was aware. And then, of course, I mean, I had no issues going on. And here we are, 3.5 weeks later.
Oh my gosh, and
Hmm.
still going on. Well,
Yeah.
hopefully that gets better for you. Hopefully the Uranus, the freedom, you can get some freedom from that tooth pain here as it's
That's why I'm
stationing.
like, let's go, come direct. We need to
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think what you're saying too about the acts of kindness, Uranus wakes us up. And it's not just talking to Saturn and disrupting the status quo and saying, hey, these changes need to take place here. But it's talking to Jupiter, and Uranus Jupiter is known, that cycle is known for creativity. And
Mhm.
I bet we're going to see some awesome music come out of this era that we're in, and art.
Mhm.
And then the other thing is that Uranus is also making aspects with all the personal planets, Mercury, Venus, and Mars right now. And yeah, I think we're getting a lot of wake up calls. And I know just something I've personally been thinking about is how to bring more meaning into my personal life. Like we're spending so much time online, and we were, and now it's even more so out of necessity. But one of the things that it's been waking me up to is how can I like reinforce and show up more fully for the people in my life that I love and care about, even though we're apart. And so Uranus does bring in those elements of creativity. And so, yeah, hopefully we'll be able to have some breakthroughs on that end as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And now we've had a little chat and a lesson, and we can all go see if we were born on stations, and also look up in the ephemeris when stations are happening and kind of practice the observation of that. So thank you so much for coming to share your knowledge and your observations with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Stormy. This was really awesome to chat with you. And yeah, it's been really awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome back anytime. We talk a lot around here, so bring more observations. We'll we'll go over them with you.
Will do.
Absolutely. All right, you guys, we're going to wrap up, and thank you so much for showing up today. And hopefully, we gave you something that was worth the time you took to show up today. If you haven't supported the Kickstarter campaign, it is out there. Feel free to support that. We're almost there. We've got about 26 days left. And make sure you come and check out Catherine and her work and her group and her peeps. And if you're looking for some place to join up, definitely checking out this group, I think, will be phenomenal for you. Okay. All right, you guys, I love you a ton, and we will see you on Friday, where we will be here with Barbara Ybarra, and we're going to talk about Noel Till and some of the cool lessons he left for us astrologically. So I look forward to seeing you guys then. Bye, everybody.